Hey there, my name is Megan and welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, welcome. Today I'm going to be doing my December TBR. So luckily, I have met my Goodreads goal of 52 books. I'm a little bit over 52 books, but I know I've read at least 52 books. So I have a little bit of a liberty with what I want to read in December, and I will be completely transparent with you. All of these series that I wanted to finish by the end of the year that I currently had ongoing, I pretty much finished none of them. And I know in December that I'm not going to have time to finish big fantasy series. So those are going to roll over into 2021, which makes me sad because I'm usually pretty good about finishing series. But on the flip side, I started some awesome series this year, such as the Stormlight Archives and things like that. Normally I read 5 books a month, but just because of the length of some of the books that I chose and the density of them, I'm only going to choose 4, and then I'm going to have one more that I may or may not get to depending on how my reading goes. But before we go ahead and get on into my TBR, if you are not already subscribed to my channel, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button, as well as the little bell icon so you can be notified every time I post new content. I post new videos every Sunday and every Wednesday and sometimes on Friday. As always, all the links to my social medias are located in the description box below, as well as a link to my Buddy Read Discord and my Patreon. So be sure to check those out. The first book on my December TBR is, of course, Rhythm of War by Brandon Sanderson. This book I started reading the day it came out, and I gave myself 4 weeks to finish it, so it's definitely a book that I need to have finished by at least the 17th of December. It's my priority, and we are buddy reading this over on my Discord, so if you are interested in joining the buddy read, even if you are not going to finish by the 17th, that's totally fine. You can just jump in and chat with us about what you have read and hang out with us. You know, we're a bunch of Sanderson nerds over there. So definitely a priority, and I will have this finished by the end of 2020. I'm loving it, loving it, loving it. The next book I'm going to be reading in December is also a buddy read, and that is Anxious People by Fredrik Backman. So every month, my Patreons get to vote on a poll for what book we buddy read together, and this month it was Anxious People, which I was already planning on reading in December anyway, so that worked out absolutely perfectly. But this book was kindly gifted to me by one of my subscribers. Thank you, Michael. And I've never read anything by Fredrik Backman before. He's an author that I have been interested in reading his work. I know that he writes a lot of emotional, hard-hitting works, as well as incorporating like humor into his writing. So I've heard that this is very humorous and charming at the same time, but it takes place in the middle of a bank robbery, which just sounds hilarious and ironic. And it follows this bank robber as he tries to, rob this bank, and then there's all of these people who get caught up in the bank robbery and just their experiences and kind of how they become transparent with one another and have to confront their own issues. So it sounds like a book that I personally have never read before, and I'm excited to see if Fredrik Backman is a writer that I like, because he's just got so many backlisted books that I can get caught up on. The next book I'm going to be reading is a YA fantasy, and that is We Hunt the Flame by Hafsah Faizal. I actually got this book, I want to say about 2 years ago. This is an art copy, and I never read it, and I wasn't even sure if I was going to read it. It's been in my classroom, like on and off. And then a couple months ago, I decided to restart my NetGalley account. So I had NetGalley at one time, and I don't have an e-reader. So I was like, well, I don't like reading on my phone. But then I have an iPad that I use for work. So I was kind of like, well, I can bring my iPad home on the weekends, and that can, be my e-reader. So that's kind of what I started doing. So I reopened my NetGalley account, and I saw that the sequel for this is coming out next year. So I requested it, and thinking I wouldn't get approved, and I totally got approved for it. So I was like, well, darn, now I have to read the first book. And I think my review for NetGalley is due by January 20th. So I need to get this one in December so that I can read the sequel in January. This book follows 2 different characters. The first one is a peasant girl named Severa, and every day she has to disguise herself as a man and enter this very evil forest in order to gather food to feed her people. And then we follow the son of the king, and his responsibility is to assassinate anyone who tries to defy his father, who is a very, very tyrannical king. But both of these characters' paths cross as they are both sent to retrieve this magical artifact that could stop an impending war. But the prince has actually been commissioned by his father to kill Zafira, the girl. So it just sounds like there's going to be a lot of mystery, intrigue. I love magical artifacts. I love quests in fantasy. That's one of my favorite tropes. And I can honestly see this kind of being like a hate to lovers, maybe romance. So I think it'll be a fun YA fantasy time, and I think it's Middle Eastern inspired, so that's fun too. And I'm looking forward to getting to this in December. The next book I'm going to be reading is Elantris by Brandon Sanderson. This is Brandon Sanderson's first ever published novel, and if y'all have not been following my channel, you know that I have been getting caught up with Sanderson's work in 2020. The only thing I have left to read is this and the Second Era, Mistborn. Every month, one of my patrons is chosen to pick a book off of my physical TBR for me to read and review on my channel, and this month it was Elantris that he chose. So I'm very excited to finally get to this because I think it'll be really interesting to see how Brandon Sanderson's writing was in his first published work compared to his later works, especially because I'll be reading this immediately after I finish Rhythm of War. And this is also the 10th anniversary edition. I got this from Target, and it said that there's 10,000 words of bonus content in here. So like, I don't know where that's added in. I don't know if there's like additional chapters or stuff that they had edited out that they put back in. Like, I've never read this before, so I don't know what to compare it to, but that's kind of interesting. When I first read the synopsis, I found it kind of hard to explain, but it follows a city called Elantris, and the people that live there are almost like gods. They are almost immortal. They're beautiful, they're strong, they're smart, they're talented, and anybody can become one of these deific beings, and something called a transformation happens to them, and they're supposed to live forever, but they end up not living forever. So it just sounds kind of interesting. I really don't know what to expect going into this, so I'm so glad that Ryan chose this for me to read because I am super excited to get to it. So those are the 4 books that I am definitely reading in December, and then I have 2 other books that I could read, and the first one is Dune by Frank Herbert. So I do have the new deluxe edition of this. This is my old beat up copy, and this is the one I'll be reading because it's nice and broken in. But there's a few booktubers that were interested in reading this, and it is a book that I do want to reread. I just don't know if it's one that I'm going to get to in December just because it is so long. Rhythm of War is long, Elantris is long, and it's one of those books where I just don't know if I attempt to read it, if I'll just be overwhelming myself. But I do have a hold on the audiobook at my library because if I get the audiobook for this, then that'll help me get through this so much faster. And I know that I probably will read it in December. So it all depends, honestly, if I get the audio version of this. If I don't read Dune, then I will read Abaddon's Gate by James S.A. Corey. This is the 3rd book in the Expanse series, and it is one that I said to myself I was going to read in December because I read Caliban's War earlier in the year, and I just don't want too much time to elapse between these books because I start to forget stuff. But this is another case where it's super long, and I'll only read it if the audiobook becomes available from my library. There's, several people waiting. So it really depends which audiobook I get first. If I get this one first, I'll read this. If I get Dune first, I'll read this. If I get neither one of them, then we shall see. Okay, you guys, so that is it for my December TBR. Super easy TBR. Definitely not a TBR that's like wintry. It's more like heavy fantasy, which, that's my brand. So, but let me know in the comments if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them. Let me know what you're reading in December, and I will see you guys soon in another video. Goodbye.